And I know this is my own talk point on these things. It's a lie. You can't scale without surprises. So the game is, how do you minimize them? How can you be intentional about the things that you're going to walk into? And then I think you have to know your industry. So if you are utilizing maybe some sort of intellectual property before you start advertising, is a pretty good idea to get the legal team involved because of copyright infringement issues. I know tons and tons and tons of clients who just grabbed a picture, threw it on their website, and got an invoice later that said, guess what? You owe us a whole bunch of money. They didn't even know it was a thing. Kind of the cost benefit game that you have to play. Building a website and using kind of stock photos or the website. If you want to build it on your own, you can. They're going to supply you with resources and tools to do that. Is that what's best for your business under the circumstance? I don't know. And maybe that's where these conversations need to come back. But I think at least having enough infrastructure around what's going on is healthy.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Podcast, filled with marketing and leadership tips on launching and growing your business with your host, Deanne Mora.
Today I'm joined by a guest who brings a rare triple threat perspective to the business world. Chris Papin is the founder of Papin CPA and a multifaceted advisor who is a licensed attorney, a CPA, and an insurance producer. You've got a lot going on. Chris has spent over 15 years helping service businesses to move away from reactive compliance, which is that stressful cycle of just checking the boxes and moving on, and toward more proactive strategic growth. His firm has been nationally recognized for its forward-thinking approach, winning the Thomson Reuters Innovation Award. Chris is also the host of the Blabo podcast, which we'll ask him more about. Behave Like a Business Owner is what that stands for, and author of the book 168 Hours, which helps entrepreneurs reclaim their time and sanity. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. First, it's an honor, just to be in the space that others are kind of talking about the same things is always really fun for me. I appreciate the opportunity. And then second, thanks for the great intro. And, it's always fun to listen to all the cool stuff that you did.
It's like, wait, is that me?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, let's start with your background. So I'm curious about what led you to this focus on growth efficiency.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a long story and condense it down, hopefully to appropriate social media bites is the way I'm going to say this. But mom and dad were entrepreneurs. So I kind of grew up in entrepreneurial household spirit. My dad passed when I was in college. My brother had to take over family operated business. So there's some succession planning components. As I went through my education, kind of studying to be a CPA, I figured out somewhere in there, like a lot of these concepts overlap. I'd love to say at the time I was so intentional that I knew I was going to end up here. But as a young person, it was kind of like, I think I know the path. So you kind of mishmash this stuff together over time. Spent a little bit of time in large corporate and enjoyed it, loved the people around me, but kind of realized the passion was more about small businesses, small business owners. That was near and dear to my heart. That's what I knew. So when I left law school, I've been on this path ever since. So that's the condensed version. The elevator pitch is I represent small businesses and small business owners. I wear a lot of hats. I don't worry about the licenses. I focus on representing those small businesses and small business owners to try to achieve their goals and objectives. If I can delegate it to me and my firm's great. If I can't, we go find other strategic partners that help us out along the way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, coming from, I also had a corporate background before, working with startups and SMBs. And I think one of the things that you have in that corporate environment is you have a large team of people doing everything that, you need legal advice. You call up the in-house legal team and, you need help with a deal and there's going to be financial advisors there to help construct the deal. And, you go out on your own and suddenly you look left, you look right, and it's just you. Right. Yeah, it's an adjustment for sure. Well, I'm curious about this Blabo philosophy. So you talk about the difference between being the boss and behaving like a business owner. So what are the most common reactive behaviors you see that keeps founders from scaling?
So there's really two that everybody relates to in some way, shape, or form. The first is kind of just that curse of being a small business owner. You wear all the hats. And oftentimes, like when a customer service issue pops up, or maybe there is a complex issue in kind of service land where there's licensed professionals, the complex issues have to go to the top of the pyramid to the licensed professionals. So client urgency doesn't always dictate responsiveness, but everything's an emergency all day, no matter what. Drop everything, handle it now. That's not scalable. That's not appropriate in a lot of instances. That's not healthy for the client, because what the client wants is what they know, but they don't recognize there's 19 layers of complexity down below the surface of the ocean like an iceberg. All they see is just that small tip that's sticking out of the water. So I think figuring out a balance there so that you are customer service responsive, you are attentive, you give that white glove level of service without sacrificing the bigger picture and helping people achieve their longer term goals is tough. And then the second element in this is just kind of that old mantra: are you working on or in your business? There's tons of people that just own a business and they've got like a general manager. They usually get it, but that's not typically who I'm talking to. I'm talking to folks like me that play kind of this dual role where they're both the business owner and some version of a technician inside of the business. What role you play, when you play that role, like subtopic you're playing the different roles for, can matter. And I don't think people are super efficient about this stuff. And what I typically see is people do what's good for them or what they like. This is the whole behave like a business owner mantra. Like, hey, I'm a good attorney, therefore I want to draft contracts and do estate plans and do all the things. I don't want to do the marketing stuff. I'm just going to delegate that and hope it lands right. But you're the business owner. You need to be present. You need to steer that ship, because nobody is going to step in and do that for you. And that's exactly what behave like a business owner is all about. You can delegate it. You can get close to that ownership, especially if you partner with the right people, but no one's ever going to own it like you will.
No, that's 100% true. And, it's interesting because I think I notice a difference when I talk to entrepreneurs who, they have a passion about whatever it is that they're launching and they have an expertise in it. And so they decide to build a business around it versus if you speak with founders who've had multiple exits and they become operators, that whole, just their mindset is completely different. They really are looking at it as a business. They're not as emotionally tied to the business. They're able to step back and look at it like a project and assess it and make tough decisions because they're not taking it personally. But that's a tough mindset. Like, are you seeing, does this philosophy get you there when you're still in your first business, or do you have to have a couple exits under your belt and, all the school of hard knocks before you get it?
I'm going to ask you the question right back, because that's what good attorneys do.
Well, here we go.
Probably the answer is yes, in some sense or form. It really depends on the person, the role, the timing. There's this weird, different conglomerate of ingredients. And no, there's not one specific path. That's what I think a lot of people gravitate to, especially in like the age of AI. Can't I just ask ChatGPT how to do step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? It will give you good basics and infrastructure, but what you're supposed to do on Monday morning at 9:06, that's undefined. And that's the whole business owner mantra, the behave like a business owner philosophy, if you will. Sometimes you got to make a decision between helping a client and running your business. That's real. And the real question back to you, you have to make these decisions in your world any given day. True?
Absolutely. And I will be honest, they didn't come easy. I mean, I think the fact that I had a corporate background helped because I'd already experienced that operator mindset, but it still doesn't, when you start your own business, you still have that passion, you still have all the attachment to it. And while you're scaling, you are, initially at that point, like you don't hire an army of people to start with. So it is you when you're starting and you're the chief cook and bottle washer, the saying goes, right? But getting to that point where you can take a step back for a moment and break down, what are all the things that I'm doing? And maybe I could carve out this piece and somebody else could do it.
Yeah.
And you just, you find ways to make that work. But what I find is really interesting, and this will probably resonate with you, is that what's the first thing that a business owner often looks to outsource? It's their accounting, because they don't like it, unless they're a CPA, right? But then if you're also outsourcing that financial accountability, you're going to find yourself without a business pretty sure. So, talk to me about that. What's your perspective?
No, so for those that are watching the video, big smile hit my face as she asked this question. But
It was not a leading question whatsoever.
well, it's almost like some people have experienced this before. But yes, you're 1,000% right. What we watch with what I'm going to say naive business owners, not that they're wrong in delegating and outsourcing that expertise and knowledge base, but there's this disconnect between accountability and execution of kind of financial performance. So I'm going to say it a little bit differently. I hired an accountant. They do my accounting. They file my tax return. I told them that's all that I want because I'm trying to keep costs down. Then when we file the tax return, a client will say something like, I don't understand how I owe taxes. Where was my tax plan? I delegated all this out to you. So for those that maybe aren't in this industry, you're doing accounting, you're filing a tax return. Please do not do more. That's called a scope limitation. Why would a CPA or anybody in this space do more work that they're not authorized to do? It's an ethical violation, number one. But this is where the disconnect with clients comes. I get trying to keep costs to a minimum, but what they forgot was what they meant, which was what I was alluding to earlier. What I meant was I don't want a tax surprise. I need a financial plan. I need these other components. And we run into this because we build all of this advisory-based planning into things that we're talking with our clients about. And frequently I'll get somebody that's like, I don't understand. This person's filing my tax return for like 30% of what the costs you quoted are. And usually at that point, my response is, may I walk you back through our proposal? Oftentimes people say, no, I remember what we talked about. I'm like, then we're not a fit. Because if you remember what I talked about and you think that's comparing apples to apples, you're nuts. But that happens all day, every day. Happens in legal, happens in advertising, happens in customer service, happens with food service, all the things. But it's a beautiful illustration because numbers are not natural to people. But folks, it is the language of business. That's what defines financial success and failure. And if you don't know how to interpret it, you're lost. And you need somebody either by your side, shoulder to shoulder, helping you understand what's there, or delegating and paying for that ownership so that they're steering the ship. And when I say delegating, that may actually mean giving people the structure to make financial decisions to cut costs. Most small business owners don't want to give that away and frankly can't afford it, but there's a balance to be had there.
Yeah.
I hesitate to say small business owners should give that away because I don't think in most instances it makes sense. But when you think about big corporate America, you have a whole team of people nested underneath the CFO to steer the ship in the right direction based on finance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think if you are a business owner of a services-based business, then it really, chances are that what your client thinks they're asking for might not be what they really need because they don't have that same context that you do. So what you just described, Chris, is from the context of someone who understands accounting and finance. A business owner, when they say, I just need you to do my tax return, in their mind, they might think that you're also going to give them tax strategy because they don't have that same context. They don't know the difference. And whether you're, if we're helping a client with marketing, we're going to ask them a question about, who is setting your strategy? Because if you want us to do it, we will absolutely do it. If you want us to just execute, we'll just execute. But you can't give us the scope to execute and then expect that we're going to give you the strategy as well, right? And most of them need the strategy. So I think you have to, as a service business owner, you have to walk them through, like, oh, you need accounting. Here's all the things that go into accounting and finance. Which ones of these things do you feel like you're comfortable taking on, and where do you need help, right? Because if you don't tell them, they don't know what to ask for. And then you end up with this crazy disconnect that, people just get upset later on.
Well, and add to this, and I'm going to pose you a little bit of a question and a hypothetical, but when you add to this, the space to have that conversation is important. So, what kind of, everybody's trying to narrow the spin, narrow the time we do on stuff. We want to be efficient with all of that. But if you don't have the space to have these back and forths, what do you do? So here's the hypothetical. And I'm going to use what I think are going to be generic terms, but steer me just because this isn't my space. But oftentimes there's noise. So you have to overcome another salesy marketer who promised I can get you traffic, and that failed. So if someone like me comes to you and says, I don't give a rip about clicks, I care about warm bodies, leads, people in my system that I can curate. How do you respond to that?
I mean, that's honestly our perspective as well. And I mean, maybe it's a bad example because I feel like there are, in the world of marketing, there's just, it almost feels like every time you go have a conversation with a potential client, it's, thank God I've never been divorced, but it must feel like if you're, you're trying to date someone who's been divorced, and you're like, no, it's not me. I'm not like that. And that's, I'm sure that other professionals experience that in their fields as well, that unfortunately there are bad actors out there that, maybe are not intentionally trying to do bad things, but are just measuring their success against the wrong KPIs. And you have to put yourself back into the shoes of the business owner and say, what really makes a difference? Because you really shouldn't really care about clicks. You should care about actual, warm bodies in the door, actual leads, people that you get to talk to, right? So, I mean, if you have that alignment up front, and if you're asking the client what their expectations are, and the client is asking you, what your expectations are in terms of the actual KPIs that you'll deliver against, then you can build the plan against that. But when you talk about the space to have the conversation is before you ever sign the check, right? Because afterwards, then it gets a little iffy.
In your point about most don't care about clicks, there are some that do. And if you get paid per click, you care about clicks. But this is different. And I always tell my clients this, like, hey, if you go to a surgeon and you've got maybe a knee issue, what do you expect their response to be? They're going to steer you to the thing you know. So this pulls back to, and I love your answer, by the way, because you're aligned in the same way that I kind of look at things. But let's say you're a dentist and you're worried about getting bodies into your clinic. You've got to create the space to have the conversation to figure out if the marketing team is actually going to get bodies in the clinic, or are they going to generate phone calls, or are they going to generate clicks? Maybe you don't know any of that stuff. And that's a beautiful space for ChatGPT and other AI platforms, so they can teach you the elements of online marketing so that you can have a more intentional conversation with folks. So it's this weird chicken and egg type analysis, but that's the curse of the business owner, which is also the blessing of the business owner. But how do you behave like a business owner if you don't know who's on first? And
100%.
You get stuck.
And since we've dipped our toe into AI for a couple of times, let's go there, because I think you raise an interesting point that I know I'm very passionate about, that using ChatGPT or your LLM of choice to get smarter about something so you can ask the professional is different than I'm just going to crank out a contract with ChatGPT, right? So talk to me about why that makes a difference.
So I'm gonna set the table and take a step backwards to go forwards, just so we level set. There are a lot of places that are selling what I would perceive to be some form of automation as AI. And I do think it's AI-based automation, like search my email for the following. We kind of had to follow search rules in the past. Well, now AI is being more predictive to interpret when you said JOHN instead of JON for a John type name, it's helping find things in a different way. So that's kind of a hybrid model. But what I don't want to get lost on is the true artificial intelligence that I think people are looking towards right now, to me, is an accelerator of knowledge. It brings ideas. It can bring some infrastructure to the table. It can do a lot of things, but it can't do any of it for you. And literally just wrote a blog post, which hopefully will kind of go up with our partner, Thomson Reuters, on their blog about the role of AI. And the punchline is, who signs the tax return? It's not Microsoft. It's not OpenAI. It's not Anthropic and all those other folks. They have wonderful ideas that need to be surfaced, and you need to create space to collaborate with your clients in these areas. There's space for AI. But at the end of the day, who bears the burden of risk?
Yeah.
And that's where I think clients need to start aligning things, because yeah, sure, it's cheap to ask, but at what cost is going to be the other side of this?
Well, I think that's a great point. And there's asking with and without context as well. Because I think if you don't know anything about a space and you ask the question, but you're going to ask it a certain way because you don't have the context in that space, and you're going to get an answer. And because you don't have the context in that space, it's going to look like a reasonable answer, and you might go use that. If you have the context from the education, the experience in that space, the way you ask the question, the level of detail that you use to ask the question, and the lens that you use to evaluate that response is going to be completely different because you have context, because you can look and go, I don't think what you just put there is right, or adjust it this way, or modify this thing over here. And when you are able to have that back and forth, a professional can scale, accomplish so much more, but they are guiding. It's like, it's the 80, I like to say it's the 80-20. It's like, 20% human expertise up front, 80% AI in the middle, 10% human checking at the other end. That model, I think you can take your business to the moon, but not if you just expect that, ChatGPT is going to become your attorney, for example. Right.
Well, in that accountability, I teased about it in the beginning. You can't delegate all of your financial responsibilities out the door as a business owner. It's the exact same thing with AI. You can't expect AI to run your business for you. It can do a lot of things. It can put a lot of stuff on autopilot. It can simplify your life. It'll save clicks. But right now, it's not going to do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love your perspective in this too about context, because this overlay matters for everything we do. The running jokes like, hey, I can ask you a quick quip about, hey, what's the best way for me to be an SEO? You'll answer the question, but that assumes I actually need to be an SEO.
Right. Absolutely. Think of it. It's no different than if you have an actual person on your team that you're training to do something. You're not going to have them join your team and on day 2, suddenly they're, running your entire department, whatever it is that they're doing, completely unsupervised. It comes back to CEO accountability, that you still have to drive the ship. So,
which ironically follows legal concepts about fiduciary duties of officers in a business. So who bears the risk? The officers of the business.
Yep.
There's my dorky law degree shining
there you
through.
Go. All right. We had to come out here somewhere. Well, so as we're talking about business owner challenges, I think probably one of the biggest challenges that an entrepreneur has is time, right? Because there's all sorts of things that they could be doing, doesn't necessarily mean they should be doing. And in your book, 168 Hours, you emphasize respecting your time. So how can a business owner identify which, we'll call them compliance tasks, are actually growth opportunities in disguise? Okay,
shameless plug, read the book.
You can hold the book up to the camera if you want. That's perfect.
That's a beautiful, thank you. Yeah, see, here's our March 3rd, we go live on Amazon.
Later.
But here's what's important that I think are takeaways for folks on this, because I'm it's easy to sell the concept. People need actionable items to go home with. So why is it 168 hours instead of 24 or 7 or 1 or whatever it is? 168 hours is a week. typically businesses don't operate inside of 1 hour or 1 day. I chose a week because I feel like it gives space to effectuate change to one thing at a time each week, if you will. So the idea here is sit down, do maybe like an old school pro-con analysis. And kind of the thing that I've been telling people to do is block 30 minutes and spend 15 minutes thinking. Literally chain your hands to the chair. Don't talk. Don't write. I'm driving business owners nuts right now, but that's a good idea. I should write it down. Here's the catch. If it's a good idea in the moment and you need to write it down and you can't remember it 15 minutes later, did it really matter? So spend 15 minutes thinking to organize your thoughts. And it's going to be a hard exercise. Then spend 15 minutes figuring out what's my priority. Once you get them down, maybe you need to reorganize them. And then you go after number 1A and 1B, because every business owner I know has like 7 priorities all at once. But focus on those things that matter right now today. What's the thing I can impact the most right now today? Sometimes it's reaching out to someone else who knows the space better and beginning whatever that process is. Sometimes it's actually building the internal infrastructure to maybe respond to the client where our service didn't meet the expectations. So it seems weird, but every business is going to have a different recipe. Of course, it's easy to start with advertising, A, because it's A, and B, because if you don't have customers, how do you offer services or goods to them? But again, it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg type deal. What problem are you solving for? How are we going to get people in the door? Most people will beta test that with friends and family and close relationships first. So you kind of have a business without a business when you do that. And that has to scale to something over time. So there's no great answer. I know that somebody's probably like, Papin just gave us a whole bunch of junk here. But you have to define what's important to your business. Nobody else knows that. Maybe it's going home at 5 o'clock. Cool. Set an alarm at 4:45 and leave at 5. Simple.
Everyone is listening to the same podcast about the latest AI breakthroughs. Business owners are playing around with ChatGPT, expecting magic, but seeing zero impact on their bottom line. Here's the reality. Tech alone is not enough. Features get copied in days and hype cycles burn fast. To actually grow, brands don't just need better tools, they need systems to scale. That's why the Alchemy firm exists. They don't just implement AI, they build go-to-market infrastructure that professional services need to dominate. That includes people, process, and technology. For owners ready to move beyond the hype, the Alchemy firm is offering a free fractional CMO AI agent customized specifically for their business. Stop playing with the tech, build the system. Visit alchemyfirm.ai today. That's alchemyfirm.ai. Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And you also speak about 3 pillars for an ethical advisor: scope, boundaries, and next step. So how should an entrepreneur apply these to their own role in a company to prevent burnout? Because being the leader of your own business is hard.
So I always start with kind of this scope conversation, and we teased about it earlier, kind of in an accounting environment. So I'm going to talk about it in a team environment. Think HR hat for a minute, but if you have a team member who maybe has some sort of issue at home, maybe you don't know what the issue is, but you perceive it to be, maybe it's a illness. Well, there's going to be time resources, there's going to be money resources, there's going to be different things in that. And I know a lot of business owners, especially as they get to know their team, they start to lean into, how can I help? What can I do? And to me, there's 3 elements inside of here. There's a personal element. As a person, you can do whatever you want. That's your choice. The other extreme is the HR professional element. Most businesses are not in the business of crossing into that personal boundary for their employees. It's an unhealthy boundary to cross. And then there's this small business element, is the way I phrase it, where you do kind of have this hybrid type relationship. Sending flowers is only going to go so far in a scenario where it's a financial hardship. So in this, what's the right answer? Do you offer them more hours? Well, that's not going to work if they don't have the time. You can't just give them a raise because they need money. Do you sit down and talk to them? Maybe you start to learn things that are inappropriate to learn, which handcuff your ability to do in performance enhancements and or hire and fire. So it's this weird space where we want to, as people, take care of our other people. But you have to have healthy boundaries and scope to effectuate that. And then the whole next steps thing is, okay, I've defined scope. I've established boundaries, because frequently people, I mean, I don't know about you, but when was the last time you read the terms and conditions on your new software agreement, right? You just click the button and move on. Then we go back and realize, oh, well, that wasn't included. I didn't realize that was going to be an add-on. I probably wouldn't have bought it. Let me try the add-on. Okay, so we've got both scope and boundaries defined. But what's next? And that's really what matters. So I look through the lens of actionable stuff. You can give somebody a day off or a paid day off. You can give somebody some flexibility to work from home or different hours in this scenario. Maybe those are the meaningful things that help. Day of recording, we just came out of a holiday, which is a holiday to some and not to others. Schools are off, so a lot of parents were at home. Giving people the ability to work from home so they can be with their kids might be a more meaningful deal than actually paying them more money or giving a bonus, or maybe just give them the day off. So again, it's this weird recipe, but you've got to sit down and figure out all the different ingredients and then kind of extract the information from your people to figure out what is going to be most meaningful to them that doesn't harm the livelihood of the business and doesn't harm the accountability and professionalism in the employer-employee relationship.
Yeah.
Super complex, a whole bunch of words, but does this resonate in some way to things that you live with?
And one of the key things that I want you to repeat is doesn't hurt the viability of the business. Because at the end of the day, if you overextend because you're trying to be a good person and the business suffers and you can't keep everyone on and you can't give the raises and you can't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then you really haven't done that employee any favors.
Yeah.
You've actually hurt them more. And so, and that's tough because, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are givers by nature, and it's tough to draw that line sometimes, but you have to think strategically.
In all of this, I've laid a significant human element into it because that's where my goals and priorities are. I want people to be fulfilled. I want them to have the resources to live a happy life. The opposite, and I'll pick on corporate because there's extreme corporatism sometimes where it's all about the bottom line. You're fired because you didn't make any money. That exists too. And that is the pure business sense. So somewhere between these two elements is the truth and where you want your business to live. Here, just in case we haven't said it, it's your business. Behave like a business owner. Right. You get to make it up. It's yours.
Yeah, absolutely. You get to draw from what the best of those two worlds are and what make that balance that makes you comfortable. But, like the saying goes, make your veg, you lie in it as well. So you have to think of what you're doing. So let's talk about structure a little bit more. We'll dive into some of your legal and accounting world. And I know a lot of listeners will probably hear the words taxes and contracts and their eyes are going to roll into the back of their head. So, most people view their taxes as it's a year-end headache. They're going to rush to the finish line, maybe after they filed an extension. How do you help clients turn a quarterly tax and contract review into a roadmap for pricing and positioning?
Well, for the interest of the audience who are about to click pause or fast forward,
don't do it.
Here's the catch. All of these things are necessary evils, and in most instances, they're minimum standards for folks that actually set up a platform for you to succeed. We don't look at them right. We complain about them. Sometimes I like to use more aggressive words there, but I won't in this instance. But, oh my gosh, I owe a tax bill. How terrible. My response, congratulations, you must have made a lot of money. There's two ways to look at this, folks. So if you stand on the right platform, planning requires a set of financial statements. If you have financial statements and you're doing planning on the regular, when you get to year end, you might be 30 days behind, 45 days, something like that before you close everything out. You have your tax plan. You have everything you need to know live. There's no surprises. If you're present in accounting, pun intended there, for all of the different variables that are going on, you should know exactly what your profit of your business is. Now, here's where this disconnect we were teasing about earlier frequently pops up is, yeah, I met with my accountant. They said I had $150,000 of profit or 1.5 million in profit. I didn't really know what they were saying in that. And if you're, again, not creating that space to have the conversation, when I tell people you have $1.5 million in profit, the implied there is that you have $500,000 in a tax liability if you have not prepaid tax. That's a base level understanding. That's why I'm pointing at profit. But people don't always know that. And it's not natural instinct to think that. But therein lies kind of this bigger conversation piece. So the joke of the day, everybody walks in the door and says, hey, Chris, can you review this legal document, contract, lease, whatever it may be, and tell me it's okay so I can sign it tomorrow? My response is, how about I don't sign it anyway? You have the same risk you do today. I don't have any risk. Let's move on down the road. Huh? You don't want the work? What's going on? You've assumed that I can review it and tell you that it's good. What if it's trash and I have to mark this up for 30 days with opposing counsel? Do you actually want that, knowing that you have to sign it tomorrow? Well, I hadn't thought about that. So what's the best way to defend against a lawsuit? Never to get in one to begin with. Get your contract clear. You can be super aggressive in a contract, but if it pisses somebody off, right or wrong, it's going to yield a lawsuit at some point. Get it clear, get it buttoned up.
Theme I'm hearing in both of those examples is be proactive, right? Like
hey, there's a theme.
If it's after December 31st and you're looking backwards at your taxes from last year, you can't do a darn thing. If it's before December 31st, maybe you adjust the timing of certain expenses that you're going to take. Maybe you can make better decisions about, do you hire that person that you've been thinking of, and can you afford the salary that you have in mind, and can you afford to invest in this other thing or to start this one other service business, or do you have a service business that is you've got one segment that's a dog and maybe you need to just get rid of it and focus on the things that are actually making you money. Like, you can't actually run your business unless you have all of your metrics for your business. So I think that sounds like that's like your platform.
It is 1,000%. I appreciate you translating a little bit in there. And then to kind of build on your concept, in finance, there's a lot of assumptions, and the assumptions don't prove true. I'm not saying business owners are wrong in this, okay? Because most business owners know their business better than their advisors do. But they'll say something like, hey, I've got a $100,000 contract. I think I'm going to bring home about $40,000 of that after expenses and everything else. They're correct. But what is in everything else that matters? Are taxes in that or not? Is rent in that or not? And that's where the assumptions start to break down. Like, sometimes we get too narrow scoped in what all the things are. And we thought we had 40 grand and it turns out we had 20. We spent the 40. So what's the other 20 going to go to? It's an unpaid expense and we don't have the cash to do it. That's where people get caught.
Cash is king, and cash is what destroys most businesses if not properly managed. So, and then on the flip side, because most entrepreneurs are trying to save a buck wherever they can in order to be more profitable, sometimes you'll get a proposal from a vendor and it seems like a really good deal, but what are some of the red flags that might suggest that maybe they're either underpriced or mispositioned for their market?
It's kind of a loaded question in the grand scheme of things. I'm going to upset somebody in response to this. But the way I always approach it is I look at three things. You've got to look at competitive bids, like for like. If you're going to grocery store A and grocery store B and something is $1 where it's otherwise $7, you generally have an expectation that, okay, maybe it's near its expiration date, or maybe it's on discount because they got a bundle deal. They're trying to get rid of stuff. So whatever that gut instinct is needs to carry through into business. And sometimes if you don't interview 2 or 3 people to have perspective about, the contract that you're looking at. That's probably more red flag for the business owner than it is for the vendor. You just need to compare so you have perspective. The second one, and I recognize it depends on location in the country, is the press. Oftentimes people will get on the contract and say something like, sorry, all the consultative salespeople out there that I'm frustrating with those, but they walk a client through each of the steps. This is what we do. So I'm actually picking on my team, but we walk people through each of the steps, and then the client will say something like, yeah, that's everything I wanted. Then they see the price. Nope. So there was a bias about what the price should have been or what the value proposition should have been for the different service items or goods or whatever it may be. So I think extracting out some version of that expectation. We have clients call all the time and it's like, hey, we want to file like a $150 or $200 tax return. Cool. Use TurboTax. My costs for all the software, all the infrastructure, and our people are more than what you're wanting to spend. I can't service you. That's a fair conversation to have up front. And then the third thing that I would point out to folks is, do you have enough substance about what's included? Picking on my banker friends, they know who I am, but they put together term sheets based on the boundaries. Then they go into underwriting. And when they underwrite, they get the actual story, not the sales pitch. And it changes the rate or the term or the duration or the down payment. And then everybody gets bent out of shape because, well, you said on the term sheet you were offering. Correct. Like every car commercial ever with approved credit. So exactly. It's the same concept inside of this. So what I frequently tell people to do is you've got to align that initial conversation with the end result. And sometimes you need template contracts to do that. I've asked people out of sequence, I'm like, hey, can I see your service contract? Well, Chris, we don't really send it until we're asking you to sign it. Okay, so on the record, on the recording, you're asking me not to read the contract and sign it blindly because I've just created some version of duress. I'm like, no. I'm like, then send me the document. But there's a lot of things you can do through that process to gain perspective. Most people don't want to, but this is another beautiful use case of AI. Take the template document, throw it at your AI of choice, and ask it questions. And it'll make you a more informed consumer than clicking blindly. So hopefully those are things that people can take away. It's always hard in this space because you don't know what you don't know, but you got to start somewhere.
No, 100%, I agree with you. And it is really interesting. I've done the same thing even with just home services providers and asked for the contract up front, and it's like they can't even figure out how to deliver it because it's in some system that they use, and I'm not at that step yet. And I'm like, well, I need to make sure that what I'm signing up for here. So yeah, I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, free legal tip of the day: don't sign if you can't see the terms. And if you signed without seeing the terms, this is I'll pick on our roofing industry for a few minutes. Like the salesperson makes you sign. Then all of a sudden you get all the other stuff and we get mad at it after the fact. You can push back in those scenarios. May not make sense to, but don't do the easy thing just because the salesperson's in front of you and you don't want to say no.
Yeah, it doesn't matter that it's their process. It's your money.
It is.
So, well, let's talk. Scaling, I know, is a big passion of yours, as it is with many of our listeners. And so let's talk about scaling without surprises. So, we know that entrepreneurs, a lot of them we lovingly call it shiny object syndrome, but they like to launch new offers or new things, new promises, this seems like a really great thing that'll bring people in the door. So at what moment in I'll call it the creative marketing process, should they call their legal advisor?
Yes. I know that just landed really awkward. So here's the deal. And I know this is my own talk point on these things. It's a lie. You can't scale without surprises. So the game is, how do you minimize them? How can you be intentional about the things that you're going to walk into? And then I think you have to know your industry. So if you are utilizing maybe some sort of intellectual property, before you start advertising is a pretty good idea to get the legal team involved because of copyright infringement issues. I know tons and tons and tons of clients who just grabbed a picture, threw it on their website, and got an invoice later that said, guess what? You owe us a whole bunch of money. They didn't even know it was a thing. So those
Please
are the
don't grab
moments.
random pictures off of Google.
Right. Take your own picture. It's that simple. It's not hard to do.
Get AI to generate it.
There's your picture. Take it.
That you can use, that you can get very low cost images. Yes, please don't do that. Those are all owned by the artists.
So this is an easy illustration, but it's kind of the cost benefit game that you have to play. Building a website and using kind of stock photos or the website, if you want to build it on your own, you can. They're going to supply you with resources and tools to do that. Is that what's best for your business under the circumstance? I don't know. And maybe that's where these conversations need to come back. I think at least having enough infrastructure around what's going on is healthy. So when you call a legal advisor, you've kind of got three components to this. One is the juice worth the squeeze. Legal is expensive. And why is it expensive? Because there's lawsuits and major risk involved. And people get frustrated and scared by the billable hour. But the reality is if you're asking, you've got people that are vetting a lot of things on the background to put you into an infrastructure of certainty. Some people value that, some people don't. Sometimes you need that, sometimes you don't. Second layer is duration, is the way I'm going to say it. Like, think leases. If you're about to do something that's going to last a duration that has a financial consequence that maybe you cannot overcome, like a lease, perhaps getting an attorney to advise you of all the different variables that are at play before you spend $200,000 over the course of 10 years is healthy. $2,000 to $3,000 worth of contract review could save you a mistake of $200,000. So again, is the juice worth the squeeze type moment? And then the third place, which I think most non-lawyers can actually help with, is kind of knowing where the boundaries are. And since you're in this space, it's easy to kind of go back to advertising analogies, but most professionals, even doctors, understand legal liability in doctor land. And I say even doctors because they're notorious for not having business classes in medical school. But they know what the standard of care is. And that's why you have to run labs and jump through all the hoops before you do the thing. It's to get everything normalized. They're not going to speak about it in legal risk perspective, but there's layers to this that build steps in the process. So I'm gonna end with a quick story, throw you a question on this, but I get this all the time. Photographer, somebody that's maybe coming out of kind of the mom phase of their life, raising young children. I have a passion for photography. A friend hired me to do the wedding. I'm going to hire somebody else and I'm going to have them be a 1099. I don't want insurance and I don't need workers' comp. That's normal because they're trying to shortcut insurance and workers' comp because those are expensive. And this is kind of the setup, if on your side, if someone calls you and says, hey, we need imagery, we need photos of our location, are you going to go out and take the photos? Or do you contract that out?
Yep.
If you contract that out, is it another business? Who's taking on the risk if you're up on a ladder taking a picture of whatever it is and they fall off the ladder? Who's going to absorb that? The customer, you, or the contractor?
Well, they have a contract because they're a subcontractor. And we also have workers' comp. So
right.
I'm a little, coming from that corporate background, I am a little paranoid about all these things. But I hear you. But
I'm asking it knowing that you're in a good business space and a savvy business person, whereas the mom who's getting into photography and looking through a different lens, not recognizing that when the person is backpedaling, taking a picture of the bride and twists their ankle and is now disabled and can't earn a living, what do you do? Because there's going to be a disability attorney, especially if folks are in a pinch for income, who's going to come in hot on that. All of it just to save a few $100 for what? So I know I kind of derailed there, but I'm not trying to scare people, but I do want to talk through real life because I think we start to rose-colored sunglasses on a lot of stuff and just say, it won't happen to me. Well, statistically, it will.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Pay for it.
You're
it's
right.
Okay to pay for it.
Yeah. And especially when, somebody needs money, they're going to use that as an opportunity to try to come after you. So that, having that few $100 discussion with an attorney might have actually been a pretty good investment. So Chris, this has been a lot of fun, but sort of eye-opening, I think, for a lot of our listeners. Some of it not so fun, but definitely
Right.
interesting. Exposing risk is hopefully has given people some room for pause. But so if our listeners only have an hour this week to stop behaving like a boss and start behaving like a business owner, where should they look first in their legal or financial documents? What's their first move?
So I would go back to that 30-minute segment that we talked about earlier. Block 30 minutes of your day, no distractions, 15 minutes think, 15 minutes write, so you can build out. And whatever comes out of that is what you should go do. Now, some thoughts to provoke this process. Number one, what's your biggest fear? Now, I realize somebody just said spiders or snakes or something like that. Throw those off the table. Like, what's your biggest business fear? And then number two, what are the things that you have the most direct impact over? Looking through those two lenses, I think you can start to figure out what are the things that I can impact the quickest that yield a result to my business. Whatever those may be, that's what you go do.
Chris, where can people reach you if they want to connect after the pod?
Yeah, lots of places. So one is LinkedIn. We publish all kinds of free stuff out there. So Chris Papin, Papin. You can also go to my websites for law firm, CPA firm, or papinspeaks.com is where you can find the book and other collateral material. Probably the best place for those looking kind of for the free content if you're not looking to actually hire me.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining me today, Chris. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for the conversation and opportunity.